All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I hiked inland quite a ways into the hills to see if I can find maybe places that Jotham and Jabin and Uriah hiked through. Okay, so this is kind of the area. I don't know, exactly where. I tried to emulate it as best I can. Okay, so here we go. We're going to go into chapter 9. We know that Uriah is now an accomplice. He is an outlaw with Jotham. They are outlaws, and they have stolen a sacrifice to the god Moloch. And you're thinking, I know, you're thinking, well, that's obvious. They're saving this little boy, and that's the right thing to do. Hmm, I don't know. I mean, I like the idea of saving the little boy. I think that's right, but it's not simple. It's not as simple as it is for us because we live in a different age, a different day, different ideas. So I think it's Uriah is very conflicted by this. He thinks he'll be haunted for the rest of his life for stealing from a god. That they feared the ideas of deities, the idea of gods. They were fearful of them. All right, so anyway, that's what they did, and now they're outlaws running away and trying to go into the hills inland in Canaan. So we're still in Canaan, but we're in the inland part of Canaan, which is more lawless and rough. Okay, and let's see what happens. Remember, Jotham is of the tribes. So Jotham is Hebrew. We'll talk about that as we go. And there are Hebrews out in this area in the hills as well. So we'll see what happens. This is chapter 9, the hills. With sharp stones and heavy sticks, Jotham and I stove in the frail little boat. Then we shoved it out, filled it with stones, and watched it go down. Jotham had Jotham had brought along some cakes, and from these we took a light breakfast. Shouldn't he have milk? I asked, pointing at Jabin. Why? Said Jotham. And I said I had heard that small children usually did, that sometimes they lived on milk. But Jotham said that I knew nothing about it and that Jabin would have to eat what we did. When we had finished eating, he said that the sooner we got away from the shore, the better. We dared not follow the highway, but we knew that we wanted to go east, and both Jotham and I could tell directions well enough by sun and shadow, and at night by the stars. For a while the countryside was smooth enough, but later it became rugged and steeper. It was not long before Jabin began to stumble, and Jotham, muttering to himself, had to carry him. After a while we took our turns with him. It was not the easiest way to travel. Later in the day I heard a sound that made my heart quicken. It was the sound of a horse's hoofs and the rattle of a chariot wheels. Jotham caught my arm and pulled me down behind a large rock. What is it? I asked him. You will see, he replied, and I watched as well as I could from behind the rock. A group of armed men came into view wearing the feathered helmets of the Canaanites. The leader rode in a chariot, but the rest were on foot. Behind them walked or stumbled a line of tall, powerful men, barefooted or in rough boots, dressed in plain, straight, homespun tunics, and with untrimmed beards. As they passed by, I saw that they were bound together with a heavy rope, passed from one to another about their necks. Who are they? I asked softly, after they had gone by. Hill people, said Jotham. Shepherds, Hebrews, probably of the tribe Naphtali. I stared at them in deep curiosity, remembering what Hannibal had told me of these people. The soldiers have probably bought them from slave raiders, said Jotham. The temples will either use them or sell them to private men. They all seem strong in that gang, so they are probably meant for the grindstones and the dye houses. He drew a deep breath and gazed hungrily about the soft sunlit countryside. They had better use their eyes while they still have them. All things will be dark for them soon. They must be going to make purple dye, those slaves. We spoke calmly enough about he spoke calmly enough, but his face was pale. Why did they let them do it? I asked. They have no leader, no judge, said Jotham. We of the Hebrew tribes had great leaders once, but we have been scattered by Egypt and the Hittites, and the Canaanites who bowed before their conquerors are rewarded and can put their heels upon us. So Uriah is asking him, why do they let them capture them to become slaves? It's not a matter of letting somebody. You'll see. They should fight them, I grumbled to myself. It is better to die fighting than to live as slaves. Then I stopped, ashamed, remembering how I had lived like a slave at home and had not died. So he realized that that was hypocrisy. He was being hypocritical, saying, they should fight them. They shouldn't do that. But then he himself, did he do that when he was in Arzawa and his dad was beaten to death? No. But now Jotham was warning me to keep my eyes sharp and my wits about me. There are things in the hills, he said, that are worse than Canaanite troops, men from the desert, Moabites, Midianites, Amalekites. They come in from the east through the valley of Bashan and lie in wait for travelers and shepherds. They have grown great and prosperous through their trade in men and women. We had come upon a small stream at which we replenished our water skins. Hey, maybe like the one I'm at. And lay still a while to rest. The soft smell of juniper and mulberry was in the air, and Jabin, who had never been far from the city, lay sniffing the air and asking questions. Are there lions out here in the country, aren't there? He asked. Yes, said Jotham. Did you ever kill a lion? No, said Jotham. I did, I told him, and gave him the story of the time a beast had come down upon our range and attacked some colts. I had not exactly killed it myself, but had held it off with a club and a knife till help had come. Jabin stared at me in awe, and Jotham looked at me with some envy and told Jabin not to talk so much. We were not so easy in our minds as the little boy, for our food was nearly gone. We must get more, said Jotham. Yes, I agreed, but how? These lands are grazing lands, he said. There must be sheep herders about, not far away. The tribesmen are hospitable and will take us in for the night at least. He fell silent. He was looking no farther ahead than this one night, and I trembled, wondering what the days ahead could hold in store. I looked uneasily about, and the country no longer seemed soft and sunlit. It was rough, hard land here in the hills, with fearful dangers lying in wait, very different from the Canaan I had come to know in Tyre. It was a lonely land, too, and for the rest of the day we saw no signs of human life and heard no voices but our own. It was not till the shadows had fallen that Jabin pulled at my robe and said, There's a man over there, on that hill. We looked, and through the dim light made out a lonely figure on a ridge not far away. He carried a shepherd's staff, but had no sheep. Jotham hailed him. Stranger, he shouted through his cupped hands. That's kind of a call that they do. The man on the ridge heard him. He stood with one arm raised in greeting, waiting for us to come up to him. And he showed no fear, as I would have done if I had been alone in these hills hailed by two strange men. Peace be with you, gasped Jotham, when he had struggled up to his side. Are you a Naphthalite? The stranger nodded. So he's a Hebrew, but he's part of the Naphthalite tribe. The stranger nodded, looking us over calmly. I saw that there was no reason for him to be afraid of us. Though we were two and he was only one, he was not tall, but he was the most powerful looking man I had ever seen. I am Jotham ben Amram, said Jotham, of the tribe Ephraim in the south. These are my friends. Are you from these parts? From Kadesh, on the Jordan, said the stranger. He had a quiet, mild voice. His face was ugly, but his eyes made that unimportant, for they were deep-set and earnest, and so wide open and direct that it was hard to look away from them. He did not tell us his name, but waited for Jotham to speak again. My friend and I have been traveling all day, said Jotham, and could not manage to keep his voice from quivering a little. The child is tired. Do you know of people here who would take us in for the night? The stranger's eyes moved quickly over us, taking in our soft, finely woven clothing and our soft skins, for mine had softened too in the past year. So remember I told you that ancient peoples, they were very good at noticing things and picking up things. So he's looking at them and figuring them out just by looking at them. We had sunk them with the boat. Our earrings and ornaments were gone. We had sunk them with the boat, thinking they would only be a temptation to robbers, though we might have gotten a good price for them in some inland town. When his eyes came to Jabin, clinging to Jotham's hand and staring at him hopefully, his face softened and he smiled a little. Follow me, he said. We obeyed. I kept my eyes upon him, taking in his shepherd's robe, which was of good material and dyed in several different colors. He walked easily, like a man who was used to rough country and long journeys on his own feet. By now we were again on smoother ground. Looking out across the valley, I could make out other figures, some flocks and dogs who barked at the sight of us. And I knew that at last we had come to a dwelling place of the Hebrews. A small boy saw our guide and ran toward him with outstretched hands. A man followed more slowly. Both greeted him with such delight and respect that I knew him to be a man of renown in these parts. But they did not say his name, perhaps because we were there. Jabin, by this time, had fallen asleep in earnest and was bundled over Jotham's shoulder like a sack of grain. These people, our guide told us, were of the family of Hushai ben Aaron, a rich shepherd of the tribe Naphtali. It was two of Hushai's sons, a young man and a boy, who had come to greet our guide. Who are our guests? asked the young man. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Samuel, sorry. Who are our guests? Asked the young man, whose name was Samuel. His words were polite enough, but there was no friendliness in his eyes. From the moment I saw him, I decided that I did not like him, and that he felt the same about me. My friend is one of you, I said. I am a Hittite in exile from my country. And the child? Asked our guide. He was again looking at the fine cloth of the boy's tunic with its purple border and dainty handiwork. He is a Canaanite from Tyre, said Jotham. We will ask no more questions, said the stranger at last. Later, when you have rested and eaten, you will tell us more of these strange things. As they went before us, I heard him speak softly to Samuel and the boy. Do not say my name before these strangers, and tell the same to your father and the others. So he wants to keep his name quiet. On the level ground were the tents of Hushai ben Aaron. They were of black goat's hair and betokened with a wealth of their owner, with rich curtains inside to divide one section from another. In the great tent of Hushai himself, to which we were taken, there was only one ornament. It was the small statue of a golden bull, which I supposed was a household image of their god. I was surprised to see Jotham look at it with scorn. By the time we arrived, the women had prepared the evening meal, a kind of stew, well flavored with onion and garlic, and it was set out in a great steaming dish. We had awakened Javin, and he was gazing about him with a look of doubt and fear. I could not blame him, for all was dim and close and strange to him. There were no brightly ornamented walls or tiled floors, no mother or maid servants to pet and scold him and wash his feet after his journey, and the firelight flickering from the torches cast shadows on the faces of those in the tent, making them seem rough and grim. Remember, Jabin is, well, and even Jotham to an extent, are used to just being wealthy and being in townhomes and having servants. And now here they are in the rough hills in a tent. Not what he's used to. There were two women in the tent, Leah, the head wife of Hushai, and Tamar, her daughter. They stayed in the shadows, not speaking, and waiting to serve the men and see them fed before they ate themselves. The little boy we had seen before, whose name was Aphiah, and who was the son of a second wife, was not so shy. He stood himself firmly before Jabin, gazing upon him boldly and reaching out to touch his fine clothes. Jabin shrank away, looking fearful and displeased. I was surprised that Jotham put his hand on his shoulder as if to protect him, instead of slapping him for his cowardice. There was little talk as we seated ourselves cross-legged around the common dish, except for Aphiah. "That boy is from Tyre, father," he said, "where the evil ones live." Jabin did not seem to resent this, but looked at Aphiah with puzzled eyes. Now, they're evil. Everybody's evil except your own self. They accuse everybody else of being evil. The food was good, though more than once I burned my fingers pulling chunks of meat from the steaming pot. After we had finished, a skin of cool water was passed around, but from which Jabin drank thirstily, though he had eaten little of the food. At last the men settled back satisfied. Hushai ben Aaron, the father, whose beard was gray but whose eyes were dark and bold, turned his shrewd gaze upon Jotham. "Now we will talk," he said, "and you will tell us why you have the tribe of Ephraim come to us from the city of evil, clothed in their finery and in company with a stranger from the nations." I began to be more and more uneasy. These people felt no friendliness toward us. Jotham had already been driven out from among them, and they hated my people. They were not like any people I had known before, and I wondered fearfully what we would expect from them. "The tribe of Ephraim drove me out," said Jotham, "because my mother was a woman of Tyre. But my heart is with the tribes, and I wish to return if they will have me." "And the child?" "They would have made him pass through the fire of Moloch the destroyer. It was to have been today when the sun was high. He is my kinsman, and I have brought him away." There was a murmur of astonishment at this, and Hushai turned his stern eyes toward Jabin. "Come here, child," he said. Jabin gave Jotham a frightened look. Jotham set him upon his feet and gave him a push toward Hushai, who took him by the shoulders and drew him closer. "Weak and soft like all the Canaanites," he said harshly. "They have fattened him, haven't they, to make a fine feast for their evil god. Our God, who is greater than all the others, does not ask the lives of our children, only of blasphemers and those who set themselves against him. There are the seeds of evil in this child." And he looked so sternly at Jabin that the boy began to cry, though I could see he was trying not to. The same anger seized upon Jotham and me, and we half rose from our places. But before we could speak, the young girl Tamar had come out of the shadows for the first time and had taken Jabin away. He is only a little boy, she said sharply, and I was surprised at how strong and bold her voice was. He is tired and has done no harm. He should be put to bed. Hushai ben Aaron was suddenly no longer fierce and frightening. He looked guiltily at our strange guide, who was smiling a little. She is right, said the stranger. Let her put the child to bed. No, no, cried Jabin. I want to stay with Jotham and Uriah. Then you shall stay with them, said Tamar gently. Where will our guests sleep? She looked sternly at her father, who shrugged, looked defeated, and turned the problem over to his wife. There was to be no more talk that night, for which I was glad, though I was still not easy in my heart. A place was made for Jotham, Jabin, and myself in a corner of the men's quarters. The night air was cold, and we wrapped ourselves well in our outer garments. It was hard to sleep, for the smells of the cooking pot filled the tent, and the wind blew. There were strange noises outside. What's that? Cried Jabin at the sound of a long howl close by the tent. Only a jackal, said Jotham. His voice sounded strange, as though he were listening in surprise to these sounds that he had not heard since childhood, and trying to remember how it had been before he had become a lord of Tyre. Do you think, whispered Jabin, that Moloch will punish me for running away? Moloch has no power here, said Jotham, in that same wondering voice. This seemed to comfort the child, and soon he was asleep, but I lay awake till I heard the feet of Hushai ben Aaron and the stranger returning to the main tent. This woman, Hushai was saying, will she come herself? She will come, said the stranger, and you will see. She has the powers of 1,000 armed men. What woman? I thought to myself. And why are they talking of armed men? But I was already half asleep. God be with you, Barak bin Abinoam, said Hushai, and with her, and with all of us. So now I knew the stranger's name. Barak, I thought. That means lightning, but he is not like lightning. And I went to sleep to dream of Barak riding in a chariot beside a misty woman in gleaming armor who had the strength of 1,000 men. Well, there's a mystery for you. All right, so now we know they are with don't be afraid of my hat. It disappears sometimes, and it's just a very expensive hat because it can disappear. All right, now, very quickly to Magic Hat. So Uriah, Jotham, and Jabin are now with the Naphthalite tribe of Hebrews out in the hills. And they know the name of Barak bin Abinoam, and they know that they're awaiting a woman who's very, very powerful. And it sounds like, they're talking about something that has to do with armed men and this woman coming. Something's going on. And Uriah doesn't know what it is. Okay? So until then, we will learn more about that tomorrow. Okay? That was chapter 9, the hills. All right? All right. We'll talk to you tomorrow, guys. I got to hike on some more and get moving. Okay, guys. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.